You don't just walk into a room. You feel it touching you from the very first second. Everything appears normal, soft conversations, polite smiles, well-timed nods, but inside you, something subtly shifts. Like hearing a piece of music where a single note is slightly off, and you're the only one who notices. You don't need anyone to explain it. You catch a glance that passes too quickly, a sentence that sounds harmless but lacks warmth, and you know something isn't quite right. And what exhausts you is not that you see these things, it's that you cannot not see them. While others simply exist in the moment, you stand slightly behind it, as if two versions of you exist at once, one living and one quietly observing, analyzing, piecing together every small detail. You don't just hear words, you hear the silences between them. You don't just see actions, you feel what remains unspoken. And over time, that begins to change the way you experience the world. Conversations are no longer simple. Relationships are no longer light. Everything becomes heavier, denser, layered. People may say you overthink, that you're too sensitive. But the deeper truth is this: you are not too much. You are simply living with a perception system that is always open, always receiving, always searching for meaning, and was never taught how to close. And when you don't know how to stop, the very ability to see things so clearly becomes the reason you never truly get to rest. And from that state, something begins to happen that very few people notice. You are no longer just seeing the world. You begin to constantly interpret it. Everything that passes through you no longer stops at the surface. A message that arrives later than usual is no longer just a message, it triggers a chain of thoughts. Are they busy? Are they avoiding me? Or has something changed? A short reply is no longer just brief, it becomes a signal to decode. And what's important is that this process doesn't happen consciously. It unfolds almost automatically, like breathing without thinking about it. Your mind doesn't wait for enough information before drawing conclusions, it fills in the gaps immediately. Because to you, ambiguity is not neutral. It's something that needs to be understood clearly. And so you begin to live in a very particular state, constantly connecting small details into a larger picture, even when that picture may not actually exist. This makes you incredibly perceptive, but at the same time it gradually takes away something very important: simplicity. You no longer experience a conversation as it unfolds. You experience it through multiple layers. What they say, what they might be thinking, what they might be hiding, and what all of that could lead to. And when every moment is expanded in that way, your mind almost never truly stops. It's like trying to read an entire book from a single sentence, trying to understand a whole story from one small sign. Over time, this doesn't just exhaust you, it begins to make you question your own perception. Are you actually seeing the truth, or are you creating too much meaning out of things that were, in reality, quite ordinary? Moreover, when that process of interpretation repeats for long enough, it no longer stops at how you see the world, it begins to turn back on you. You are no longer just analyzing others. You start analyzing your own emotions in a very strict way. A feeling of sadness arises, and instead of simply letting it pass, you immediately pause. Why am I sad? Is this reasonable? Am I overreacting? Even a moment of joy is no longer complete, because the instant you smile, a part of you steps back to observe. Am I being natural? What do others think of me? Did I do something wrong? Gradually, you are no longer just experiencing life, you are monitoring yourself, living it. It's as if you are simultaneously the actor, the audience, and the critic all at once. You don't misstep, you don't lose control, but you also no longer feel the natural ease that once existed. Everything becomes overly conscious. And the most exhausting part is not that you think too much, it's that you cannot turn that process off. Even when nothing is wrong, your mind continues searching for something to understand, to analyze, to place into some kind of logical system. This makes you incredibly deep, but at the same time, it takes away something very simple that many people have: the ability to just be there, without needing to understand everything, without needing to control every emotion. And when you live too long in that state of constant self-observation, a question begins to arise not about others, but about yourself. Are you truly living, or are you merely trying to understand life? You no longer take things in as simply as you once did. A compliment is no longer just a compliment. It becomes something to examine. An act of care is no longer just kindness. It brings with it the question of whether there is something behind it. You are not trying to be suspicious, but your mind automatically looks beyond the surface, as if you are always seeing the backside of everything while others are only looking at the front. And over time, that creates a distance that is hard to notice. You still talk, you still connect, but inside you are not fully relaxed. There is always a part of you observing, evaluating, holding back a small layer of caution. You don't become cold. You simply become unconsciously careful. But that very carefulness makes it difficult for you to truly feel safe in relationships. At the same time, because you are used to feeling so deeply, you also begin to become the one who carries emotions in every space you enter. No one has to say anything, but you can sense when someone is uneasy, when the atmosphere is tense, and almost instinctively, you adjust yourself to soften it. You speak more gently, respond more slowly, choose your words more carefully. Others see you as thoughtful and easy to be around, but they don't see the cost behind it. You don't just understand their emotions, you absorb them. A conversation ends, but the emotional residue remains within you. Someone else's story doesn't stop when they fall silent. It continues echoing in your mind. Gradually, you are no longer just tired from thinking, but also from feeling both your own emotions and those of others. You become a place where people unconsciously unload what they do not want to carry, while you rarely have a place to feel lighter yourself. And that is the paradox. The deeper you see, the more you understand, the more you keep everything steady, the harder it becomes to live simply, the harder it becomes to feel light within the very connections you are trying so carefully to preserve. And when you begin to realize that you are seeing too much, feeling too much, and carrying too much, a question almost naturally arises not, "Is something wrong with me?" but rather, "Why have I become this way?" This does not happen by accident, and it is not a flaw that needs to be fixed. It is the result of how you have adapted to the world, sometimes from a very early stage, in ways you may not even be consciously aware of. There may have been a time in your life when understanding other people's emotions early was not an advantage, but a way for you to feel safe. You learn to notice the smallest shifts, tone of voice, eye contact, the way someone falls silent, because you could not rely on what they said. And over time, that ability did not disappear. It became your default. It may also simply be how your mind works. You do not easily accept things at the surface level. You naturally tend to go deeper, to connect, to search for meaning beneath. A sentence does not stop at being a sentence. It unfolds into multiple layers of thought. An action does not stand alone. It is placed into a larger picture. This makes you deep, but it also makes it hard for you to stop. At the same time, when your capacity for empathy is high, you do not just understand others, you almost live their emotions. You hear a sad story, and it does not remain at the level of knowing it stays within you, spreads, lingers longer than necessary. And if you were never taught how to distinguish what is yours and what is not, you will unconsciously carry it all. There is also a very subtle mechanism you may not realize. You use understanding as a form of control. When you can anticipate what might happen, you feel less surprised, less hurt. So you begin to analyze ahead, think ahead, prepare ahead, not because you want life to be complicated, but because you are trying to make it more manageable. Yet this very process keeps you in a constant state of low-level tension, as if everything needs to be monitored. And in the end, when you have lived this way for too long, you almost stop accepting simplicity. A pause is no longer just a pause. A delay is no longer just someone being busy. Everything must have meaning, not because the world has become more complex, but because the way you perceive it has become more layered. And when all of these come together, you do not just become someone who is highly aware. You become someone who is constantly connected to everything around you, and sometimes forgets how to disconnect in order to feel light again. But there is a deeper layer that very few people have ever told you about, and when you touch it, you begin to see yourself in a completely different light. This trait of yours, this heightened sensitivity, is not only the result of what you have experienced in this lifetime. Sometimes, it is also an echo of what existed before you. There are reactions within you that happen so quickly you cannot think, in feelings that arise without any explanation in your current experience, as if you are responding to something familiar, even though you have never consciously lived through it. And this is where modern psychology begins to meet a deeper perspective, closer to what is often called emotional inheritance across generations. In psychology, there is a concept known as transgenerational trauma passed across generations. It is not merely symbolic, it is a studied phenomenon. The stress, fear, and instability experienced by one generation can leave imprints on the nervous system of the next, not as specific memories, but as patterns of reaction. For example, someone raised in an environment where their parents had to stay constantly alert, reading situations to avoid danger, does not only learn that behavior through observation, their nervous system is also programmed to maintain that vigilance. And when they have children, those children do not start from zero. They grow up in an environment where sensitivity is normalized, where subtle signals are amplified, where emotional instability is quickly felt. Over time, this becomes part of an internal structure, like an undercurrent you never realized you stepped into. But if we stop at science, the story is still incomplete, because some things are not only passed through behavior or environment, they are carried through something harder to name. In many Eastern perspectives, it is believed that each person carries not only their own body and memory, but also the unfinished echoes of their family lineage. Unresolved emotions, unnamed fears, repeated patterns across generations do not disappear. They continue to exist in another form. And sometimes, they find someone sensitive enough to feel them not to suffer endlessly, but to recognize and end the cycle. If you look closely, you may notice repeating patterns in your family. People who had to be strong too early, people who had to anticipate others to keep peace, people who placed others' emotions above their own. And you, in some way, did not just inherit these behaviors, you feel them more deeply. You do not only live within them, you recognize them. And that creates a unique position. You belong to the flow, yet you also stand outside of it, observing. From a scientific perspective, this can also be explained through epigenetics, how the experiences of one generation influence how genes are expressed in the next. Research shows that prolonged stress and psychological trauma can alter how certain genes function, especially those related to stress response. This means your nervous system may have been prepared to react more intensely, more quickly, more sensitively to your surroundings. You did not randomly become this way, you are continuing a chain of adaptation that began before you. But at a deeper level, if viewed through a more spiritual lens, this may not be a burden, but a role. Not everyone recognizes repeating patterns. Not everyone senses that something isn't right in what others accept as normal. But you do. You feel it in the way people speak, in the way emotions are held back or overlooked, in the way unspoken things still linger. And because you can see it, you also have the capacity to do something not everyone can, to stop continuing it unconsciously. This does not mean you must heal your entire family or understand everything, but simply recognizing that some things did not begin with you is already a profound step. Because when you believe everything is yours, you try to fix yourself. But when you understand that part of it is inherited emotional residue, you gain a healthier distance. You can say, I feel this, but this is not entirely mine. And within that space, choice begins to appear. Perhaps you are the first in your family to question instead of repeat, the first to pause and understand instead of simply react, the first to feel deeply, yet begin learning how not to carry everything. In a sense, your sensitivity is not just a personal trait, it is a meeting point between past and present, where a pattern can finally be seen clearly. So instead of asking, why am I like this? Perhaps a different question is more fitting. What is moving through me, and do I want to carry it forward? And when you begin to see things this way, your sensitivity is no longer just something that exhausts you. It becomes a deeper form of awareness, not only of yourself, but of everything that shaped you before you could name it. And perhaps, after moving through all of this, you begin to realize something unexpected. The problem was never that you see too much, but that you never learned where to place what you see. You carry it. You carry that glance, that sentence, that feeling into your mind, into your body, into moments that were meant to be quiet. You do not just live a day, you relive it many times. from many angles, through many possibilities and assumptions. And at some point, you are no longer tired of the world. You are tired of the way you keep the world within you. But here is what matters. You do not need to become less sensitive to feel lighter. You do not need to turn off your depth. You only need to learn something no one ever taught you: how to be with your awareness without being carried away by it. The first thing to understand is this: not everything you notice needs to be kept. You can walk into a room, feel tension between two people, recognize the awkwardness in a conversation, and then leave it there. You do not need to take it with you. You do not need to analyze it further. You do not need to turn it into a story in your mind. Imagine your awareness like light. It can illuminate everything, but it does not need to hold on to what it touches. Some things only need to be seen, and then allowed to pass. At first, this will be difficult, because you are used to holding on in order to understand. But gradually, you will realize that not all understanding is necessary, and not all understanding brings peace. Then, you need to learn a very subtle distinction. Feeling does not equal responsibility. You can sense that someone is sad, but you do not have to fix that sadness. You can recognize that a relationship is struggling, but you do not have to be the one to resolve it. You may have unconsciously believed that if you understood enough, everything would become better. But the truth is, not everything you see belongs to you to handle. Think of other people's emotions like waves. You can see them, even feel their weight, but you do not need to jump into the ocean every time they rise. You have the right to stand on the shore, observe, and let them pass without pulling you under. Another thing you need to practice, and it may feel unfamiliar at first, is allowing things to have no deeper meaning. Not every silence hides a problem. Not every change is a sign. Sometimes, a delayed reply is simply because someone is busy. A passing glance is just distraction. A short sentence is simply because they do not think as deeply as you do. This does not mean you are wrong for seeing depth. It means you do not always have to go there. You can perceive multiple layers without stepping into all of them. Sometimes, peace does not come from understanding correctly, but from stopping at the right moment. And then, perhaps the most important part, you need a space where you are not the one who understands others, but the one who is understood. For a long time, you have been the one who holds balance, listens, adjusts, but you are also human. You have emotions that need to be set down, thoughts that need to be spoken, without being analyzed in return. If you do not have such a space, you will always be the one who contains everything, but never releases it. And no one can carry everything forever without exhaustion. This is not easy, especially if you are used to handling everything alone. But allowing someone to truly see you, not the composed version, but the real one, is how you begin to feel lighter. Finally, remember something simple, yet difficult. You do not need to live every moment with the same level of awareness. There are times to look deeply, but there are also times to simply be. No analysis, no questions, no need to understand more, just existing in the moment as it is. At first, this may feel empty, even uncomfortable, because you are not used to that lack of control. But over time, you will realize lightness does not come from understanding less. It comes from no longer holding on to everything you understand. And when that happens, you do not lose your depth. You will still see more than others, still feel more subtly. But for the first time, you are no longer carried away by everything you perceive. You no longer need to hold the entire world inside you to feel that you understand it. You are still you, just a lighter, calmer version, and finally, able to truly rest within yourself. And perhaps, after everything you've been through, from seeing too much, feeling too much, understanding too much, you begin to touch a truth that is very quiet, yet deeply liberating. You do not have to carry everything you see. You do not have to understand everything in order to be at peace. And you do not have to fix everything to feel okay, because what has exhausted you was never that the world is too complex, but that you have been trying to hold too much of it within yourself. You are not wrong for feeling deeply. You are not wrong for noticing what others do not see, but you have grown used to turning that ability into a responsibility. A responsibility that no one ever truly gave you. You have grown used to being the one who understands, who adjusts, who keeps the balance, to the point that you forgot. You also have the right to feel light, to not understand everything, to not control it all. And maybe the change does not begin with becoming someone else. It begins with something very small, yet very real. You allow yourself to stop carrying more. You can still see but not hold on, still feel but not absorb, still understand but not turn it into your burden. You begin to live with your awareness instead of being led by it. At first, there may be a sense of emptiness, a slightly unfamiliar feeling when you no longer analyze everything, no longer try to piece every detail together. But within that space, you will gradually rediscover something you have long forgotten: lightness. Not because the world has changed, not because everything has become simpler, but because, for the first time, you are no longer trying to carry the entire world inside you. And when you look back, you will realize you were never too much. You were simply someone who sees very deeply, in a world that never taught you how to stop. But now, you can learn that, not to lose yourself, but so that, finally, you can remain with yourself in a more peaceful way.